Week 14 fantasy football waiver wire stream pickups. We're here to tell you who to pick up. We're here to tell you, give you some ideas of some players who might be available, given that this is probably the last week in a lot of fantasy football regular seasons. I know some people have playoffs that start this week, which is crazy to start playoffs with teams still on bye. Also, it's kind of crazy that the NFL has byes in Week 14. I know, we do the whole Thanksgiving thing with 3 games on Thursday, but it feels like they shouldn't be a week off of byes. I don't know. That feels like something that needs to be fixed. But we're back. Full crew's back. We got Ashton back this week. And we're here to talk about some pickup stuff. We're also here to talk about if you have any questions, if you have any, start sit-em questions. I assume all trades are done, but for whatever reason, if you have trades going, let us know. We're here to help you out. We're here to talk ball. We're here to just hang out and have some fun like always. Ashton, how are you?
Not too bad. Coming off a night where I, played Kyle Williams anytime touchdown scorer as part of DraftKings King of the End Zone promotion. So, he didn't get the longest touchdown because the Patriots defense special teams had a 96-yard punt return. But, still a clean little plus 1,100 to start the week off. No big deal.
It's a nice hit. Was that kind of crazy that they didn't take – I thought it was a touchdown, but they didn't, even review it at all?
I'm going to be honest. I wasn't even watching the game. I just saw – I sent it in my main Dynasty group message. All I said was I've just returned from the future, and all I saw was Kyle Williams anytime touchdown plus 1,100. Hey, and then as soon as it hit, I just sent, crystal ball emojis because why not?
You're right. I guess it doesn't really matter how you get in the end zone as long as you get in the end zone, right?
Yep.
Awesome. I guess let's just get right into it this week. I guess how's Thanksgiving? Did you have a good Thanksgiving before we get into it?
Yeah, I mean, we were, me and my fiance, we were sick over the Thanksgiving holiday. Unfortunately, we were still able to do our stuff at our house the Sunday before. So other than being sick and, whatever, it was fine. We just laid in the bed, watched football for a couple days. She had it a little bit worse than I did, but, just a good excuse to just lay up and watch ball for a couple days.
It's the way to do it. I guess this is probably being a northerner. I mean, do you have anything that I would think is odd at Thanksgiving, like a traditional Thanksgiving dinner? What does that look like for you?
So I cook. I cooked everything this year like last year. So we had turkey, ham, chicken and dressing, which is kind of like stuffing. But I don't know if you guys do stuffing up north. We had mashed potatoes, mac and cheese. We make this thing called cowboy beans, which is basically just baked beans, kidney beans, bacon, ground beef with a little ketchup, barbecue sauce, and brown sugar. It's really good. And then we did Mexican street corn, which is just canned corn. Throw it in like a disposable baking dish with some sour cream, some mayo, some cilantro, some lime juice, a little tahini, and mix it all up and let it bake for a little bit. Nice. And I think that's the majority of what we had as far as regular food goes. So we had desserts on deck, but that was pretty much it.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, we didn't do anything crazy. I went over to my parents and I think we did chicken instead of turkey, which whatever. I like turkey, but you can't go wrong with chicken. And that's really. And then what's funny? We did. My dad made up a frozen pizza at 10 at night.
Hell yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, which is kind of funny. Because I had made the joke let's get a Papa Murphy's Take and Bake at lunch, and then 10 o'clock roll around and goes, I can go for a pizza, right? I'm like, yeah, that's how it is.
That's what I'm talking about.
One more question for you before we get into football talk here. We talked about this before, but I mean, at least in Green Bay, we kind of got a little blasted with snow over the last couple days. And is there any even thought of snow? How cold is it down by you? Anything crazy going on with weather?
It's pretty cold for this time of year right now. It was in the low 30s today, which is usually pretty cold. I mean, we'll get down in the 20s sometimes. If it gets really cold, it'll get down in the 10s. Sure, the teens, I should say. We had wintry mix overnight, but we haven't had really any snow yet. We usually, for whatever reason, this West Tennessee is so weird. We usually don't get our snow until late February, early March. We'll get a lot of ice towards the end of January sometimes. That's really the biggest thing down here. The majority of people down here like snow because it's something you don't get to see all the time. But unfortunately, we get a lot of just mostly ice because it'll be 40 degrees and it'll rain and then it'll drop to 25 overnight and it'll just sheet of ice all over the road. So
the worst too.
Yeah, not fun.
All right, cool. All right. Let's get right into it then. As always, we have a handful of positions to talk about: quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Excuse me. And again, anyone watching, please drop any questions you have. We're here to help out as best as we can, and not as best as we can. We will help out. We will get you moving here, because I imagine a lot of people are in must win right now. I'm actually in a league where it's 12 teams, 6 playoff spots. The top 5 are settled, and so then there's 5 more teams that are all 6 and 7 going for the last spot this week, which is actually kind of really fun. And I'm one of them, so it's not as fun as I would like it to be. But as a team who started 0 and 6 and now 6 and 7, then that it kind of made a nice turnaround there.
Yeah, Thanksgiving week was really consequential for a lot of my leagues too. I know I jumped from 6th to 4th this week because in my main redraft league, because we do league median too. I don't know if there's a lot of people out there who do league median, but I won my matchup, won median. That pushed me from 6th to 4th, which is cool. I get an easy matchup. Playoffs round 1. My team started rough, but that's because I was waiting for Rashee Rice to come back, and made kind of probably a bad trade at the time. Right before CD got hurt, I think it was the week he got hurt, actually. I traded CD away for Garrett Wilson and TreVeyon Henderson. Wilson's been kind of a zero. Or no, it wasn't even Garrett Wilson, it was Debo, sorry.
Better than Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I looked out good because running back was weak for me. So I've been trotting out TreVeyon Henderson and Kenneth Gainwell every week, but it doesn't matter because I'm trotting out Rashee Rice and Rondé Gadsden. I've got the Rice Mahomes stack, and it's just when you're getting 50 points a week from 2 players, it's hard, it's tough. And then in my main dynasty league, the guy, our commissioner, who has won the last 6 league titles, I think, back to back, just got put out of the playoffs in week 1 by his quote unquote biggest rival in the league. So it's a good time over that.
Yeah, that's nice. Awesome. So let's just start off right at the top with the quarterback. And here's a little spoiler alert. I'm going to use both these guys in my quarterback streamer article too. But as always, we're going off of Henry. Henry is a writer for us. Go to flurrysports.org to read his full breakdowns on all these players. He has percentages, ownership percentages, as well as some idea of how they've been playing. But his number 1 waiver wire pickup this week is Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence against the Indianapolis Colts. Indianapolis Colts are down Sauce Gardner, I believe, this week. And while the Colts, in a vacuum, their defenses look great over the last couple of weeks, it hasn't felt like as dominant as it was to kind of start the year. But I think we all have an idea of what Trevor Lawrence is as a quarterback at this point. Now, is there room for improvement? For sure. But at this point, it feels like he's maybe a tier below middle tier quarterback in the NFL. But I mean, Jaguars 8-4, and he's quietly quarterback 14 on the season. Owned in 34% of the leagues. If you're a Drake May owner or a Daniel Jones, not Daniel Jones, a Drake May owner or who's ever on by, is this someone? I guess Brock Purdy. Is this someone that you're going out and if you need a quarterback, this kind of feels like he might be the best option out there this week.
I think you could do worse. I'm never feeling good about starting Trevor Lawrence, unfortunately. I'm going to be backed into a corner in one league this week, week before playoffs, actually. I don't need to win to get in, but it would be nice. And I'm going up against the number 1 team in the league. Yeah. And it's Trevor Lawrence as my super flex or Cam Ward. That's an easy decision. And then, I say as my super flex, as my QB1. And then if Jaden Daniels comes back, it'll be Jaden Daniels. If he doesn't, I picked up Mariota this week to start instead, so I don't have to roll out Cam Ward against the Browns, which is – oh boy, fire up the Browns defense, everybody. But it's kind of like Henry wrote in here. Is he a really good quarterback? No. But can he get the work done for you? Yes. And that's kind of where we're at this point of the season. You're not really looking for anybody that's going to carry your team, put your team in the JanSport, so to speak, and carry you to a title. You're just more or less trying to fill in the gaps, especially with this last bye week. Like you say, if you're missing Drake May, Trevor Lawrence is going to be more than good enough to get you through 1 week, or he should be at least. Sauce Gardner, his injury really didn't look good. I've seen some rumblings that people are thinking it could be like an Achilles kind of deal, but who knows? I'm not a doctor by any means.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just, I'm with you. Lawrence, you could definitely do a lot worse. I definitely would rather play Lawrence than the next guy we're going to talk about for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like too, just because really – when we're talking about the teams that are on bye, really the only quarterback relevant team, I guess, is Drake May. If we're not talking about deeper leagues, I know we have Bryce Young, Brock Purdy, and Tua also on bye. But if you're starting those, you're probably not in a position where you need to win. But like if we're looking for guys to pick up, I mean, you need a Hail Mary play. You just like to your point, you just need someone to fill a spot. I mean, Lawrence's rushing upside is always there, right? Once you get down to the goal line, especially if you get to the 1 yard line, they've done it a couple times where you just have Lawrence jump over the line and use that long frame to get in the end zone. So I think just rushing upside alone, I think he's definitely worth. I don't want to say a Hail Mary play, but a Hail Mary in quotation marks play just to kind of fill a spot for Drake May this week. The other guy to talk about is Tyrod Taylor, who, with Tyrod Taylor, it kind of looks like the Jets have some semblance of a passing attack. Not that it's elite by any means, right? But even without Garrett Wilson, they are moving the ball, a little bit better than what we saw with Justin Fields, at least through the air. And again, Tyrod Taylor, similar to Trevor Lawrence, I mean, that rushing upside is there. But with such a depleted area of weapons, like we're having John Mechie and Adonai Mitchell, who I guess are probably two castaways at this point, who are kind of just finding a spot. I mean, Tyrod Taylor is probably worth a look. I don't think that I'm going out of my way to pick him up, but I think just out of virtue of not really anything great on the waiver wire right now. I mean, Tyrod Taylor is probably the second option here if Trevor Lawrence isn't available for you.
Yeah, I don't think there's really going to be much else at quarterback on the waiver wire for you this week. I mean, the only other name that comes to mind is, maybe if Mariota's on your waiver wire and Jaden Daniels is out again, he might deserve a shout. He's I thought he played well against the Broncos. Gave them a chance to win right until the end. The other one of the lists I'm pulling from here just to cover all my bases suggests like Trey Lance, and that would be obviously if Justin Herbert's hurt and can't go, but I haven't checked in on that. My assumption is that Herbert's fine. The Dolphins defense low-key sacked Tyler Shough 4 times last week, picked him off as well and forced a fumble. So, could that be just like a rookie kind of just taken advantage of a little bit by defense? Possibly. But I think that the Dolphins defense is not just as bad.
Agreed.
Which is kind of funny to say that they're not terrible, but they might be able to, maybe they're starting to play a little bit. Any team that's got Bradley Chubb lining up on the edge is going to, be a threat to get a couple sacks. I mean, between the two, I'm definitely wanting to play Lawrence over Tyrod Taylor. But if you need an absolute, I got to throw somebody in my lineup, I don't hate Tyrod, especially for a rushing upside.
Yeah, and I think if you're in an absolute, maybe you're in a 2-quarterback league or a 16-team league and you need something out there, I don't hate Tyler Shough this week. I'm not, confident that he's going to put up big numbers or anything. But I think they got Tampa this week. I think they're probably playing from behind in this game. Tyler Shough has thrown, I think, 38 passes in back-to-back weeks, 38 or more. So they're going to be passing in that game. Again, you don't need to pick him up if you don't have to, but in absolute desperate situation, I think he is an option. The other thing that I wanted to talk about with quarterbacks, I can't remember. It will come back to me. Well, let's talk about running backs. Running backs. So speaking of the New Orleans Saints, let's talk about Devin Neal. It really looked like Devin Neal kind of played the workhorse role for the Saints last week with Alvin Kamara, which I guess was kind of expected, right? So Devin Neal comes in, plays 59 out of a possible 72 snaps on offense. Really 47 rushing yards out of 14 carries. It's not great, but he is used in the receiving game. Again, going up against Tampa, who you can move the ball on, but to that point, they're probably playing from behind. I think Devin Neal has to be owned. I just don't know if he started this week.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. Whenever you get into situations with these really kind of fringe guys, especially at running back, it gets a little dicey, a little weird. I really did a terrible job this week. I did not follow football that closely on Sunday. But I mean, Devin Neal, if he's going to be the only one healthy, I don't know anything about, I think, Alvin Kamara is dealing with a sprain, Kendrick Miller's going to be out for the season, if I remember correctly. So, if I'm looking at their depth chart on Sleeper now, and the next guy up, if Kamara's hurt, is Audric Estime, which is not great.
What scares
I'm like
me,
you. It's
what scares me about it too is they get down to the goal line, and I wrote him up as a start tight end last week, which is probably not a good idea on my part. They get down to the goal line, it's going to be Taysom Hill taking snaps too. So I don't love that.
Right.
There's not. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of touchdown upside from Devin Neal. But again, when you're looking at the waiver wire, you're just looking for opportunity, right? At this point in the season, you're looking for guys who are going to be on the field. I mean, Devin Neal is going to be a starting running back. I know it's for the New Orleans Saints. I know it's for not a great offense line. I know it's for a team that's probably playing from behind. But how many other starting running backs are you finding on the waiver wire right
now? None, and that's the answer to your question. And I think that like you said, Devin Neal is not just a complete zero in the pass game. I don't think.
Right.
If I remember my evaluation of him as a prospect, I feel like he could kind of play and work in the pass game. Tyler Shough hasn't just been like scrambling to check the ball down to running backs. That's kind of been Juwan Johnson's gig a little bit. But, if he catches like this week, for example, he had 14 carries for 47 yards, 3 catches for 22. That's not a bad stat line. If he falls in the end zone, you're happy with 14 points from Devin Neal. So,
yeah, I think he's I'm ranking him. He's probably a running back 3, low, like real low end flex. Flex 2 is not a position, but he feels like he'd be like that flex, that tier after a flex. So like again, maybe you have Travion Henderson or Ramondre Stevenson or either the Carolina backs or God forbid you don't have Christian McCaffrey this week, which I imagine is probably going to do a lot of people in. I bet a lot of people miss the playoffs because they don't have Christian McCaffrey this week. I mean, Devin Neal's probably a play for you this week.
As gross as it sounds, I think you're exactly right.
Yeah. Let's talk about Bashal Tutin, a guy who, only played 18 snaps for Jacksonville compared to Travis Etienne's 31. But Tutin fell in the end zone. He's obviously in a very important running back handcuff that all the Travis Etienne owners should probably own Tutin. But I think last week, you started him at your flex. He did provide for you this week. 7 carries in 4 of the last 5 games and 3 touchdowns over that span. Again, it's kind of a different situation than Neal, right? Where Tutin's coming in as kind of the number 2 guy. And we're not really, he's not really guaranteed those starter carries, but what he's been doing with the carries that he's getting, he has been producing. I know we've talked about him a couple times on the show. But I think it kind of stands to the point of all ETN owners should own Tutin. And if you're someone who maybe plays, you're looking towards the playoffs a little bit, maybe if you pick him up and, instead of the ETN own and if you have an open spot, you can kind of play a little bit of defense that way. But I think moving forward, Tutin is probably in that same tier as Devin Neal is kind of a low end flex. And if ETN's out, I think that he probably gets bumped up to an RB2 territory. So I think it's definitely worth a pickup and worth a look, at least for a stash for fantasy playoffs here.
Yeah, I think stash is definitely where I'm going with this one because if you take out the game where Tutin got injured in week 12, he's kind of very quietly out-touched Travis Etienne. I've got it 28-21 here across the 2 appearances on either side, week 11, week 13 on either side of week 12. He had 3 carries inside the 10 this week. Travis Etienne didn't touch the ball inside the 10, so that to me kind of signals it could be a changing of the guard kind of thing for Tutin. And if you can pick him up for absolutely nothing and he starts kind of eating into Etienne's base work, I think that he's well worth a flex or a roster spot for sure. We've seen this movie before with rookie running backs that coaching staffs like as the season rolls. We're seeing it with Travion Henderson as the season's kind of gone on. He's kind of getting worked more into the offense and the young guy that kind of just ices the vet there. So I think at the very least, you pick him up, you stash him, even if you're not planning on playing him this week. If not for no other reason, like you said, block him from the ETN owner. And if 2 weeks from now he's getting 60% of the backfield touches and starts kind of exploding and blasting his way onto the scene, and then you've got another running back you can throw in your lineup every week.
Yeah, I think he's definitely one to consider. Shit, sorry. I have him on the second screen here. I'm watching Florida Duke, and Duke just beat Florida 6-7, 6-6, which sucks. Hate that fucking school. But anyways, I also let's take a time out here. Let's talk some college basketball for a second. I fear in my heart of hearts that my 3 least favorite teams in college basketball might be the 3 best teams in the country in Duke, Purdue, and Michigan. So this is not a great start to cut to the college basketball season. For
bad vibes, yeah.
Yeah, bad vibes. All right, back into it. pulling up Henry's article. The only other running back that Henry talked about was Chris Rodriguez, Washington Commanders running back, owned in 12.4% of the leagues. He's been writing about him all year. So it kind of felt like Sunday night was a little bit of a showcase that Rodriguez is the preferred running back to Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. 37 snaps for Rodriguez. And kind of like he was that early down work. He's going to be touchdown dependent as it kind of feels like all those running backs that we're talking about. For the last 6 games, he's found his way into the end zone though. Even with Marcus Mariota, at quarterback, Washington has been able to move the ball. Like you mentioned, Washington was able to move the ball well against the vaunted Denver defense last week. Chris Rodriguez is a guy. I'm going to say similar to Tootin and Neal. It kind of feels like they're all in the same tier. But out of those three, it kind of feels like he has the best shot for a touchdown, which maybe that speaks a little bit more to who if you only had one guy to pick up. Maybe he's the guy you want to pick up if you're chasing that touchdown. Because Rodriguez I think he's got the better shot of a touchdown out of these three. Maybe not. Maybe Tootin is there. But I think he's close in this.
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest thing is that he's outsnapping Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt pretty easily. He's kind of icing Bill, which 7th-round rookie gets iced. More to come at News at 10. Yeah, I think the big thing for me here is like the quarterback situation in Minnesota is a complete dumpster fire right now. Yeah. I think Max Brosmer probably is probably in pole position for funniest interception, at least this season.
That might have been the worst game by a quarterback of all time, to be honest.
It was pretty bad. It was a Peterman-esque, true, fumble. And it was just – he definitely heard his own theme music on that one interception right before the half, and it did not pay off for him. It's just dire in Minnesota, man. Like, it's really bad when, you think J.J. McCarthy might – you hope he's healthy.
Right.
It's just not good.
It's even worse when you look at the roster and with Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones on the roster to end the year last year. Now, I know that those are guys, but both those guys have been playing well this year.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of said this jokingly to some of my boys in Dynasty, and I was like, the NFL cannot allow the Vikings to somehow get Ty Simpson, because that would just be a really. I haven't done a lot of scouting yet. A lot of early stuff I'm seeing. This is just kind of an extra tidbit for the folks. Is Simpson's kind of a real kind of more heady, kind of good processor guy. That to me, rings bells for someone that would be good for Kevin O'Connell in a scheme like that versus someone that's a really good athlete like J.J. McCarthy is. Anyway, not important. We're talking running backs here. I think the big thing is game script, right? If the commies come out and they're up, 2 scores and the Vikings just are complete shit show on offense, Chris Rodriguez is going to keep getting touches, him and Jeremy McNichols, maybe even Bill a little bit. If it's kind of a one-sided or a comfortable game for Washington and Chris Rodriguez is up with 15 carries, 16 carries, you're probably not upset, especially because he has a good chance of getting in the end zone. Like we said, he's really pretty good short yardage back, I think.
And I think too, right? I guess the selling point for the Vikings this year has been Brian Flores and his psycho defense where there's blitzers coming from everywhere. You have no idea where they're coming from. But really, the way to attack that is kind of run right at it. Like we saw the Packers do that a couple of weeks ago.
Saw the Falcons do it.
You saw the Falcons do it. So if that's the game plan for Washington, Chris Rodriguez is the guy who's leading that charge of let's just run dives right up the middle every single play. Chris Rodriguez was working that well with Denver last week. So I would imagine running the ball, pounding pounding the ball up the middle is probably in the game plan here. And again. I think that's great for Chris Rodriguez. I'm kind of talking myself into him. I like him as the best running back pickup this week because I do think that Washington can move the ball on the ground, and I do think that he can fall into the end zone. Would I be surprised if Chris Rodriguez came away with a 14 rush, 60-yard game plus a touchdown? No, and if I'm saying that, that's big flex appeal this week.
For sure, I think it's just kind of more what you're looking for, right? If you have to have somebody this week, which I guess is the point of the show, I'm wanting to start Chris Rodriguez probably over Bashal Tootin. But if you're kind of more looking okay, I'm going to see if I can add someone sneaky that might help me in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or whatever. I think it's Tootin. Not to say that Chris Rodriguez is not going to, but I think Tootin just has a higher ceiling. One other note I'll add here. I know, I don't know how many people play in Yahoo leagues, but Kyle Bunn guy's only apparently rostered in 58% of Yahoo leagues. What are we doing? Pick him up. Yeah. Story as old as time. DeAndre Swift loses base work to back that's more suited for it. I wasn't even a huge fan of Mononga as a prospect. Like, I thought he was fine. I just didn't think he was anything special. And, he's coming in and kind of really carving out a role for the Bears. And, man, talk about the Bears. They're really on a roll. I know you don't want to hear that as a Packers guy, but they've kind of been on a roll this year.
No, I will say, too, Green Bay's defense has looked awesome this year. The one way to beat them has kind of been, just power running. Without Devontae Wyatt this week, I'm very scared of this rushing attack to see what exactly, against what Chicago did against Philly last week. So yeah, I'm in on Kyle Mononga this week. I absolutely agree with you.
I just went and checked his stat line: 22, 130, and 1. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. The Bears' offensive line is awesome. Ben Johnson knows how to run scheme. So I'm terrified. Especially. There's a little Packers talk we'll get into it next year tomorrow when we do our Packers show. But Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker, Packers have a lot of injuries kind of in their run defense, which I think spells, a lot of good omens for the Chicago run offense. So, yes, I'm 100% with you on Kyle Mononga. Moving over to the receiver room. How about this? I mentioned him off the top. He's not the number one guy that Henry has here, but let's talk about A. Mitchell for the New York Jets. So coming into the week last week, it was kind of, there's opportunities both for A.D. Mitchell and John Mechie, who would be the guys who kind of emerge as the one that you can really go after. Mitchell is the one who kind of produced last week. So Mechie saw 8 targets. Again, not bad. Probably another guy that we could talk about. But Mitchell came in, reeled in 8 of 12 targets, and scored a touchdown. Again, we talked about it with Devin Neal, but when we're looking for opportunities on the waiver wire, owning 2.7% of the league, A.D. Mitchell's seen 25 targets in his first 3 games with the Jets. So that comes out to just over 8 targets a week. That's as good as almost any wide receiver in the NFL in terms of opportunities. Now, are we really counting on Mitchell to be the wide receiver 1 to be a 100-yard and a touchdown a game guy? Probably not. But at this point, 8 targets is definitely worth a flex appeal, I think.
For sure. And I think you mentioned it. The only player that has been targeted at a higher rate, at least against man coverage, since A.D. Mitchell was traded to the Jets, is Amon-Ra St. Brown at 38.1%. Mitchell's seeing like a 35% target rate against man coverage. Is nuts. I have no clue what the Dolphins like to do as far as like coverage goes. So if you do and know that the Dolphins are a man team, fire him up for sure. He's really just kind of replaced Garrett Wilson's role while he's still hurt. Garrett Wilson, we know, is going to be out at least one more week. Mitchell was a guy that I really thought would be – he's kind of a very similar player to Alec Pierce, just kind of a downfield kind of threat. But I thought he was a pretty good – I thought he was a solid player. I thought he would be a really good kind of wide receiver, liked his skill set. And I think that going to the Jets is going to help out a lot as far as maybe not for his development, so to speak, but I think it helps a lot in a sense that he's going to a place where the only other competent receiving threat they have right now is John Mechie. And John Mechie, like you mentioned, was kind of a castaway from the Texans anyway. So,
I would imagine just thinking of with who the Dolphins have, like Dolphins have Rasul Douglas at defensive back. I think he likes to be up on the line, play physical a little bit. So is this a game where Mitchell can kind of bump around him and burn him deep for one? I think it's possible. But to your point about Alex Pierce, I think Mitchell is kind of in that conversation where one catch is all it really takes for him to give you a good fantasy day, right? You get one catch for 40 yards and a touchdown. It's 10 and a half, 11 points in PPR. And then everything else is extra. So yeah, this feels like more of like a Hail Mary play in my mind. But yes, I think it's definitely worth a Hail Mary play because as we've been saying, 25 targets over 3 games. You mentioned 35% target share against man coverage. There's really nobody else to really throw the ball to in this Jets offense. And I know we're talking, and this is why I love fantasy football, because why the fuck are we talking about the Jets offense, which is, especially the passing attack, but there's opportunities, man. If you need a plug and play guy, if you don't have a Stephon Diggs this week, if you don't have a Ted McMillan, I love going for a high risk, high reward with A.D. Mitchell this week and trying to steal a win from someone.
For sure. Yeah. I think that I think he's just a very solid boom bust play. Like you're not in a way that Trey Tucker has been in a sense where he might only score you like 8 points, but he could go for 30. And if he ends up finishing on the higher side of that high end outcome, you probably won your week already at that point. I don't think who else is here got here. Okay, we're not going to talk about it explicitly, but I just want to bring up this Thursday night game that we have that is going to be an absolute banger. Cowboys Lions. Is that one? Now, is that at where's that one? Is that in Detroit?
I believe it is. Let me tell you.
Yep, versus Cowboys. So that one is going to be on the Cowboys and the Lions on the fast track in Detroit. Yeah, I'm going to lay my mortgage on the over for sure.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
That's going to be a fun game. I think just for what it's worth, if you have Jameson Williams and you're thinking about starting or sitting him this week, just put JMO in your lineup, please. Just start Jameson Williams.
I agree 100%. Let's rattle off one more receiver here, and then we'll do tight ends, and we'll get out of here. You go to FloridaSports.org. Henry has his fantasy football waiver wire pickups for week 14 out there. I'm going to give you one more. You have to go and read the article for the other one. Jaden Higgins. All of a sudden, Houston kind of looks like a competent offense, right? That defense is kind of been the story of the show. And let's just talk football for a second before we get into Jaden Higgins. Like the Chiefs kind of feel like they have to win out, right, to like make the playoffs. I know if Indianapolis collapses, they have the tiebreaker over them, so that could kind of be big in the grand scheme of things. But against Houston, that might end this week, right? The Chiefs playing 2 backup tackles with Will Anderson and Will Anderson and the boys coming after Patrick Mahomes. Like I'm not going to say Patrick Mahomes could die in this game, but I think that this Houston defense might have their way with the Chiefs offense, which feels kind of crazy to say after watching the NFL six weeks. But Houston has a really good opportunity to kind of knock off the top dog this week on Thursday Night Football, which I'm very excited to watch this game.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep it 100. I would not be surprised to see the Texans win out. I mean, KC and then, 3 of their remaining games are like at least comparable opponents. They go to KC this week at Chargers week 17, Colts week 18, which will probably be a big one for the AFC South. Yeah, man, I think the Texans are getting hot at the right time. They're finally figuring it out on offense a little bit, I think. I definitely wouldn't want to be on the opposite side of Will Anderson. I'm never going to count out Mahomes, especially at home. We've seen it for his entire career. Sometimes he just figures out a way to get it done. Sometimes, that like you said, the Chiefs have kind of stumbled a little bit lately. But when Mahomes kind of goes into that, we've got to win out mode. He's just kind of a different beast. Free game, Mahomes rushing overs when it's this time.
Oh, yeah.
His line's usually around like 25.5. He'll probably go for 30. He's gone for 30 in back-to-back games, actually. So
I've won a lot of money taking over Mahomes rushing yards in playoffs.
Yeah, honestly, any quarterback rushing, like just think about the game itself. Especially if it's going to be like a blowout situation and the quarterback on the other side wants to run a little bit anyway. Don't be afraid to take quarterback rushing overs. It seems a little goofy, but don't be afraid to do it. Be smart about it. Don't go out there and be like, yeah, I'm going to take Jared Goff's rushing over. Don't do stuff like that. That's how you lose money. But someone like Pat Mahomes that we know is going to scramble anyway. Don't be afraid to take his overs rushing. He's probably going to have to run a little bit to sustain the Chiefs offense. Kind of adjacent to the Chiefs. I said this over the weekend watching ball. The Bills have got to – the Bills offense is just tough to watch right now, man. And it's just like they get the Bengals this week, and so that should be like a spot where they can kind of blow up a little bit. But it's just so – upsetting to me knowing what Josh Allen's capable of, and he's all of a sudden in this offense where every third play is a like play action screen to Ty Johnson. Like the Bills have got to get a legitimate receiver so bad. And I'm sure they thought Keon Coleman was going to be that guy. Who knows if he's going to or not. I know there's quite a few receivers in this year's draft that look like they're going to be pretty good. So Bills, please get Josh Allen, an actual receiver. You can't keep trotting out there with Khalil Shakir as his best option. That's just not it.
Yeah. Yep. And let's hit Jaden Higgins here real quick, and then we'll go into tight ends and we'll get out of here. Jaden Higgins is kind of really emerging as that second option in this Texans passing attack, and it's been nice to see Nico Collins kind of get his footing back under him and start playing good ball. But fourth double-digit PPR scoring effort in the last 6 games for Jaden Higgins last week. I think he's a guy that it's going to be really hard to predict that he's going to score a touchdown, but he's a second option. He's going to be seeing secondary coverage the rest of the way. He's been the rookie that's kind of broken out into being CJ Stroud's number 2 guy. I think he's a top wide receiver waiver wire pickup option. And against the Chiefs defense, where I imagine eyes are on Nico Collins this week. I would not be surprised if Higgins comes out and catches at least 2 balls right off the bat and finishes the game with 6-7 catches this week.
Yeah, and the interesting thing with Higgins is, he kind of came out of the draft and he was this kind of like, huge 6'4", like kind of X receiver, right? And the Texans have kind of turned that around and started playing him in the slot. He has a snap share of almost 15% from the slot.
He's like big tight end at that point.
So he's playing bully ball. He's playing kind of, if you want to think of like Jawan Jennings as kind of that guy that plays like the power slot role, like that's kind of a buzzword that a lot of teams use. Is this, they put a big guy in the slot and let him kind of bully nickel corners, but he's playing the big slot. They're letting Nico Collins go to work on the outside, and it's kind of working out for him because if you're a nickel corner and you're like 5'8", 185 or whatever, what do you do with 6'4", 215 lining up across from you? He can go either direction. He can stop on a dime and just box you out. Like, what do you do with that? So, and I like to see that his role's emerging. Since the bye week, he's only had less than 5 targets twice, and that was against the Seahawks, one of the best defenses in the NFL. Broncos, one of the best defenses in the NFL. Yeah, lately it's been 7, 7, 9, and 5 against Jags, Titans, Bills, and Colts. Still not playing just like a ton of snaps. He's still like sub 60%, but I mean that's fine. He doesn't have to be on the field for all that gritty like run game work. That's what they've got guys like Xavier Hutchinson for. I think the Texans are going to have to throw the ball to win this game. I don't think Nick Chubb and Woody Marks are going to be getting it done against the Chiefs. So I think Higgins is definitely a solid play for your lineup this week.
I agree. And then talking about the tight end position, we talked about Trevor Lawrence off the bat. Let's talk about maybe his number 1 option with kind of the jumble of receivers. But it's Brenton Strange. We talk about Brenton Strange a lot on this show. As a tight end. Yeah, as a tight end who's out there. I say it all the time. Tight end's a position where you either have a Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, or you're streaming the entire season. If you're streaming the entire season, if you're at this point where you're still looking for that tight end, Brenton Strange might be the guy to kind of just put in your lineup and not even think about. So two games back from IR, he's put up 2 double-digit PPR performances. Of course, it took a touchdown to get there, but I think in this offense, I guess other than Travis Etienne, if I'm predicting anyone to score a touchdown, it's probably Brenton Strange, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, he to your point about that power slot, that big slot. I feel like Brenton Strange is more of a receiver than he is a blocker for a tight end. It feels like he can kind of exploit matchups, and maybe as the Jaguars are going for a division title here, kind of rely on that a little bit to kind of I don't want to say jumpstart this offense because the offense has been all right, but to jumpstart the offense other than Travis Etienne. So yeah, I think Brenton Strange is as good as probably just off the top of my head, I'm thinking maybe there's 6, 7, 8 tight ends better than him the rest of the way. Like I really like Brenton Strange going forward here.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is that he's playing. He's not just playing a lot of snaps. He's not just only good offense, but he's got a really good target share too. 22.4% since he's come back from injury. That's incredible for a tight end. Anything over 20%, you're doing something right at tight end. Especially with Travis Hunter still hurt. Hunter is out for the year, right? Like he's on IR and done for the year for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he's done for the year. So I think that part really helps Brenton Strange out because the Jaguars did trade for Jacoby Myers. He did score a touchdown this week, but I think that if you're looking for somebody to kind of be another weapon besides Brian Thomas Jr., I think Strange has got a good case for it. We've talked about it a lot. He's this huge kind of freak athlete. Seems like all Penn State does is crank out freak athletes, but
right.
He's got good snap shares. He's got good target shares. He's kind of producing at the same time. We're not really a big deal to do stuff against the Titans because they're the Titans, but I think he's got 2 weeks here back to back against the Colts and the Jets where he could really have good games, and then Denver comes in. They're always Denver defense is tough. The Commanders were able to put up points against them, and Zach Ertz I think quietly had like a pretty decent night. at tight end for what it's worth. Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at his point total. Oh yeah, he had 20-point game, 10 for 106. That's awesome. The only thing I remember about Zach Ertz from that night was them throwing him a screen. And that to me was just so funny, throwing Zach Ertz a screen, the guy who like famously catches it and falls down. But yeah, whatever.
For whatever it's worth, too, for Brenton Strange, he has the Colts this week. The Colts give up the fourth most fantasy points per game to tight ends at about 9 a game, which again, it doesn't sound like a lot, but when we're talking about tight ends, that feels like a fortune of points. So yeah, load up Brenton Strange this week. Put him in your lineup. Don't think about him. And if you're someone who's been streaming and looking for an option, like he might be your tight end going into the playoffs. To your point, he has a couple good games here against Colts, Jets. So yes, Brenton Strange moving forward, I think could be. I'm not going to say a league winner, but could be a league helper. The only other tight end to talk about, Darren Waller with Miami Dolphins, made his return last week. Played 27 offensive snaps, targeted 3 times, which doesn't seem like a lot, but as the Dolphins continue to move, imagine Waller just continues to get ingratiated back into the offense. They did throw him a red zone target that was kind of an off-base throw, but we saw him earlier this year kind of be used in that red zone role. They're very different players with Darren Waller and Jonnu Smith, but last year I think Jonnu Smith is a big league winner for a lot of people. When Miami gets down to the red zone, they were throwing, getting creative with him, throwing him screens, throwing him, all these kind of things to try to get him in the end zone. I don't think Darren Waller totally fulfills that role, but I think there are certain plays that Mike McDaniel does scheme up for him, when Miami does get down to the red zone. Again, another big target, another big athletic guy who, given how bad Tua Tagovailoa has thrown the football this year, can kind of, help that out given his catch radius and his kind of run after the catch here. So I think when Miami gets down to the red zone, other than De'Von Achane, he's probably the number one target in the red zone, just given size and athletic ability. I think you're really, searching for a touchdown for Darren Waller. If it doesn't hit, you're probably not putting together a good week. But streaming tight ends, Darren Waller, they have the Jets. Who do they have?
Yeah.
They have the Jets this week. Well, again, to your point, not the greatest defense. The Jets have given up 7 touchdowns to tight ends this week. So a touchdown is not the realm of possibility for Darren Waller this week.
Yeah, and I think you said it best. Is he's kind of getting a lot of usage in the red zone. If you're getting usage in the red zone as a tight end, you're a valuable person to throw in your lineup. That's the best thing you can be as a red zone threat as a tight end. So I think you're starting Darren Waller this week. I think you're starting Brenton Strange this week. I don't think you just have to understand that they may not be great for you. They may only score like 7 or 8 points, but they could, spike and have big games given their circumstances. I do have a general question for you. So in one of my dynasty leagues, this is half PPR, super flex, tight end premium. So tight ends score a point per reception. Everyone else is half.
Yep.
I think most of my lineup's pretty much set. This is super flex. We play 2 flexes, 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs. I'm starting Aranda Gadsden in my tight end spot for sure. Because Tucker Kraft is obviously done for the year. Khalil Shakir, I think, is unfortunately making his way as one of my flexes because of bye weeks for Stephon Diggs, a bye week for Stephon Diggs, I should say. My second flex spot, I'm completely split between Travis Etienne and Juwan Johnson, tight end for the Saints. My gut says Johnson because they're going to have to throw the ball against Tampa Bay. And as soon as I do that, I know that Etienne's going to rip off like 80 yards in a score. But I think that's where I'm leaning right now is Johnson.
I agree with you. I like Juwan Johnson this week. I like him. I'm a Juwan Johnson guy. A couple of years ago when he first really came out of the scene in fantasy class, he won me a championship. So I'm in debt to him for like feels like the rest of my life. But yeah, I especially with tight end premium. To your point, I think Tampa is a defense that they have been able to, teams have had success moving the ball through the air against. Not that teams are winning against it. Not that I'm expecting the Saints to win against it. But, as always.
They are kind of a run funnel, though, now that you mention it, because, Big Vita Vea just kind of clogs up the middle. So
right.
That kind of probably leans into more passing opportunities for Johnson to catch. So, yeah, okay.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at.
I've talked about him a lot this year with Juwan Johnson, but he just continues to be that steady. He's not going to go out and get you 100 yards and a touchdown, but he's been that steady, 6 target over the middle, easy throw for Tyler Shough to make. You mentioned it off the top there, that he's been that safety blanket. So yeah, I agree with you that this feels like it could be an ETN week, but as a guy who started ETN and was able to skate by in a guillotine league, I'm starting him. Which was awesome. I don't love the Tootin usage. I don't love, I don't know. Just something feels off about ETN this week. So yeah, especially with the tight end premium, I think Juwan Johnson. That's what I would play him.
Yeah, I was eating these boys alive before Tucker Kraft went down because I was just rolling out Tucker Kraft, Juwan Johnson, or Andre Gadsden every week. Just I don't care. I'll throw 3 tight ends at your head. I really don't care. I was just looking at this too. Davante Adams this year, by the way, has more games with 2 or more touchdowns than games where he has not scored.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's awesome. He's like a legitimate goal line threat, kind of a la Mike Evans was a couple years ago, and it's so awesome.
Yeah, I love Davante Adams. One of my favorite players ever. But yes, I agree. I think Juwan Johnson is a move here. To your point, in a dynasty league, I have a dynasty league. It's 2 flex spots. I've been when Tucker Kraft was healthy. I guess now that I'm talking about it, I've been rolling. I have good tight ends in the league, not really much else. But I've been doing Tucker Kraft, Trey McBride, and Travis Kelce, which has been a very
that's what I'm talking about.
Fun lineup that was a fun lineup when Tucker Kraft was healthy. With Patrick Mahomes as quarterback, so that was a fun, that was a fun thing to do. But that's what we got this week, Week 14 fantasy football streamers. We'll be back next week for, I assume, teams getting. We'll talk about first round of playoff stuff. If you're watching after the fact, have any questions, please drop them wherever you're watching this. Tune into our other shows this week. We get stuff going on all week. We have, I think we'll have a little bit more content coming out. We have a lot of content coming out on the website. We'll have a little bit more coming out, especially with fantasy playoffs coming up, especially with NFL playoffs coming up. I think we're gonna do a little bit more DFS stuff. We're gonna do some underdog pick stuff. We're gonna have some fun. We're gonna try to make some money. We're not gonna try to make some money. We're gonna make some money. You're gonna make some money. We're all gonna make some money together. So with that being said, I appreciate everyone watching, and we will be back next week. Peace.